The next part is about testing our view. So let us scroll and let us see what's happening inside. So what happens is Django ships with a test client. So for example, I'm using the browser. So the browser is my client. But for testing, we need some kind of an automated setup. And that setup is being provided by Django itself. So what we can do is, let me just scroll a little bit down and let me open up my terminal and let us start experimenting right over here. So the first thing, as usual, let us go inside our Python shell. So Python manage.py, then we want our shell. Let me clear up everything. The first thing that we want to do is we want to set our testing environment. But before that, we need to import something. So we can say from django.test.utils, let us import setup test environment. Next, let us call this method. So we want to call setup test environment. The next thing is, let us also import the client. So we can say from django.test, let us import the client. Also, let us initialize the client. So let us create a variable called as client and let us create an instance of client. Now, since we have a client, we can go ahead and we can start testing our views. So the first thing is, let us try to simulate when we are getting our home page. So let us create a variable called as response and let us see what happens when we call our home page. Or you can also say that let us get our home page and let us see what kind of response we are getting from our server. So here we can say that client.get and we need to specify the path. So we just want the home page. So let us specify the root path. Now we are getting back a response saying that not found. And yes, this is not found because we don't have a URL for this one. So if we go back to our code editor and if we go to our main project URLs, so inside my site, I need to go to my URLs. So here we can see that we don't have a root path. That means we don't have a path like this. And since we don't have a root path, that's why we don't have a match over here. And since we don't have a match, we get the output as not found. We can also do some more testing. For example, whenever we are not able to find something, the server sends us back a 404 error. So let us see if we are getting this error with this response or not. So what we can do is we can simply check for the status code. So we can say response dot status code and here we have it. We have the status code of 404 and 404 stands for HTTP not found. Now let us try to call our polls index page. And for that, first we need to import our reverse because we don't want to create the URL ourselves. We will use reverse to create the URL. Now we can say that the new response would be client.get and inside this let us create the path. So we want to use our reverse function and we want to reverse the URL by the name of polls and index. So if you go back to our code editor and if I go to my polls and then to my URLs, here we can see that we have a URL by the name of index. So that's what we are trying to call right over here. So we simply want Django to go inside the polls application and from polls application, we want to fetch the URL by the name of index. Now let us see what's happening. Let me clear up my screen and this time we saw that we don't have any errors. Now let us see what kind of status code we are getting. So this time we are getting the status code of 200 and this HTTP status code of 200 means that everything was okay and our query was successful. Now we can also see the contents of our response. So we can say response.content and let us see what we are getting back. So as you can see, we are getting the contents of our HTML page. Here we have the unordered list, then we have the list items, then we have the anchor tags and so on. Now we can also see the context that we have passed to our templates. For example, if I go to my templates Oh, sorry, let us go to the views first. And here we can see for the index view, we are passing a context object name, and the context we are passing is latest question list. So what we can do is we can also see the contents of this latest question list. So what we can say right over here is from my response. Now this time we want the context, not the content. From context, now this is going to be like our key and value pairs. So let us write the key of latest question list, and we are getting the right response. So we are getting a query set back, and inside the query set we are getting back 2 questions. Now let us go back to the documentation and see what's happening next. We just saw all of this. We saw how to set up the test environment. We also saw how to work with the client, and we have done all of these things. The next part is about improving our views. Let us go back to our code editor and let me explain what's happening right over here. So we have a small bug inside our views as well, and that is right over here on line number 15 inside our index view. So here we have the same bug that we saw in the last video. For example, if we have a publication date which is 30 days in future, so our query is going to fetch that date as well. But we don't want a question which is 30 days in the future. And we can fix this query by simply filtering it out. So here let me add the method for the filter. And first we also need to import something. So here I want to say that from my Django.utils, I want to import my time zone. Now let us go back to the index view, and here we simply want to filter for the questions whose publication date is less than today. So we can use the Django database API, which goes something like this. So we can say that we want to filter with our publication date. Now we want to use a special syntax, and that is by using our double underscore dunder, and the next part is less than or equal to, so we can say LTE. So we want to filter by our publication date which is less than or equal to today's time, so we can say time zone dot now. So now what's going to happen is first we are going to filter for the publication date, and after we filter we are going to order by publication date, that too in descending order, and we want to limit to just 5 questions. Now since we have improved our logic, let us go ahead and let us write the test for our views. So again, inside our polls application, I want to go to my test file. Let me collapse my sidebar, and below all of this, first let us create a convenience function by which we can create questions. Let's create a function by the name of create question, and this is going to take our question text and the number of days. Next, let us create the variable of time, and we can say time zone dot now, plus we also want to add our time delta, and we can say that days is equal to the parameter that we pass inside the function. The next thing is we simply want to create and return a question. So here we can say that we want to return and question dot objects dot create, and let us also pass the parameters. So the question text is equal to our question text, and next we want our publication date is equal to our time. Let us also write the type hint. So this has to be a string and the day has to be a float, and this method returns us a question. So this is just a convenience function that we have created for making questions. So what we can do is we can create questions in the past and also for the future date. Next, let us write the actual class for testing. So here let us create a class for testing our views. So we can call it as question index view test. And again, this has to inherit from our test case. The first scenario that we want to test is what happens if we don't have any questions inside our database. So let us create a method for this one. So we can call it as test no questions, and as usual the first parameter is the self. Inside of this, let us get the URL and also save the response in a variable. So let us create a variable by the name of response, and here we can say that self.client.get, and here we can again use the Django reverse. So first we need to import it. So here we can say that Django.urls, I want to import my reverse. Now let us go back again. So here we can say that we want to create the reverse for the URL, and the URL is our polls index. Now in this case, we don't have to set up the testing environment because that is being taken care by Django itself. The next is, let us see what we can test inside our response. The first thing is, let us test if our response code is equal to 200 or not. So here we can say that self.assert equal. So this time we want to say that my response.status code should be exactly equal to 200. Now let's also test what happens if you don't have any questions. So let me open up my sidebar, and if we go to our index page, so here we can see that if we don't have the latest question list, so here we have the else block. That means if we don't have any questions, so at that time we want to display the text as no polls are available. Now let us go back to our test. So this time, since we don't have any questions, let us see if we're getting the right response or not. So here we can use another method by the name of self.assertContains, and here we want to check if the response actually contains the string of no polls are available. The last thing is, we can also check for the response context. For example, let us go back to our terminal, and last time we saw that our response context is giving us the right query set or not. But this time, since we don't have any questions, let us check if we are getting empty query set or not. So we can do that by using another method called as assert query set equals, and here we can say that the response dot context latest question list. So this we want to get a empty response back. Oh, I forgot a code right over here. Now let us go to our terminal, and again let me exit from all of this. Let me clear up the terminal and let us run our test one more time. So we can say python manage.py test our polls application. So here we can see that this time we have 4 tests. So if we go back to our code editor, so this is the latest one that we have just created, and from the last video we have 3 tests right over here. So total till now we have written 4 different tests. So again, let us go down and let us see what we can do next. So this time let us write a test for a question which was created in the past. So what we can do is we can create another method and we can say test past question. Again, the first parameter should be self, and here let us create one question, and remember we have created this convenience method right over here. So here let us create a question. So I can say my variable of question is equal to, and let us invoke the function. Let us pass the question text to be past question, and this time I want to say that my day should be 30 days in the past. So that's why I'm saying minus 30. The next is, let us create a response. So let me just copy from right over here and let me paste it right over here. So this time let us check for the context. That means our context should return back a question. So let me just first copy this one and let me explain it to you. So this time we are using the same context, but since we have created a question on line number 48, that's why we should get the question back. So let me write the question right over here. Now let us go back to our terminal. Let me clear up all of these things and let us run our test one more time. So this time we can see that we have 5 tests and all of the tests are working fine. So let us go back to our documentation and let us see what's happening over there. So here they are talking about improving our view. So we saw that we had a bug inside our index view, And what we did was we created a filter for our query set. And the next thing is they are talking about testing our views. So we have started with testing our view as well. Here they are creating this helper function, so we have created that as well. So the next thing is they are creating a class for testing our index view, so we have done that as well. Next, we have also written a couple of tests. So we have written for the test when we don't have any questions, and we have also written a test when we have a past question. Now let us scroll down and let us see what's happening. So here they have a test for the future question. So let me just copy and paste because the logic is going to be the same. Let us go back to our code editor and let me paste everything right over here. So here what's happening is they are simply creating a question in the future. So you can say that the days is equal to 30. And since we are creating a question in the future, so at that time our context should be empty. Now let us go back to our terminal. Let me clear up all of those things and let us run our test one more time. And it looks like we have a small bug, and that's happening on test line number 57. And the error is we are getting an unexpected keyword argument by the name of days. So let us go back to our code editor and see what's happening. So what's happening is the official Django documentation has named this parameter as days, but we have written it as day. So let us change this from day to days. So this becomes days. This also becomes days. And let us go back to our past question method. This also becomes days. And I think we are good to go. Let us go back to our terminal. Let me clear up everything and let us run the test one more time. So this time, as you can see, we have 6 tests. Now let us go back to our documentation. So the next test is when we create a future question and also when we create a past question. So in this case, only the past question should be displayed on our web page. So let me just copy this method. So let us go back and paste it right over here. And let's see what's happening inside this test. So here they are creating 2 questions. One is right over here on line number 67. Now this question is for the past date, and that's why they are saving this question inside our variable of question. And on line number 68, they are creating one more question, but this time the question is 30 days in the future. And for our testing, we want to see if we are getting the question from the past inside our response or not. So again, let me save this. Let us go back to our terminal. Again, let me clear up everything. Now, if we run the test, we can see that we have 7 tests. So now let us go back to our code editor and let us go back to our documentation. And let us copy the last test as well. And let me paste it right over here. So this time what's happening is they are creating 2 questions that we can see right over here on line number 79 and 80, and both of these questions are in the past. So this one is for minus 30 days and this one is for the last 5 days. And while testing for our query set, we want to see that if we are getting both of the questions or not. Again, let us go back to our terminal and let us run the test one more time. So again, this time we can see that we have all of the tests and all of the tests are passing as well. Now let us go back to our documentation. So we saw this test up till now. So let us scroll a little bit down. The next part is about testing the detail view. So we have the same bug inside our detail view, and that is we don't want to see a question which is published in the future date. And as you can guess by now, it's a very simple fix. So again, let us go back to our views. Let me open up the views file, and inside our detail view, so this is the class that we created last time. So here also we can override the get query set method. So let me go back to my index view and let me copy this method, and let us go to our detail view and let us paste it right over here. And here we need to make a very small change. Since this is a detail view, by default it is going to show only a single question, so we don't need this one, and that's it. Now let us go to the documentation. The next is they are also writing a couple of tests for the detail view. Now let me just copy and paste because the code is pretty similar. So let us go back to our test right over here, and let me scroll a little bit down, and let me paste all of the code right over here. Now let us see what is happening inside the test. So this time we are testing for the detail view. The first test is for the future question and the next one is for the past question. So let us have a look at what they are doing inside. So right over here, they are creating a question which is with a future date. So as you can see over here, the next thing is they are using reverse, but this time we want to reverse the URL of polls detail. And since we also need the question ID for this URL, we also need to pass the question ID, and that's what is happening right over here. Next, we are using client.get to fetch this URL that we just created. And since the question was created in the future, that's why the status code should be equal to 404, and 404 means not found. And the similar thing is happening for the past question. So this time we are creating a question in the past, but this time we want to assert that the response contains the question text. Let us save the file and let us go back to our terminal. Let me clear up all of those things and let us run our test one more time. So as you can see, this time we have a total of 10 tests and all of the tests are passing successfully. So let us go back and let us see what's happening next. So this is what we just did. So next they have a couple of more ideas about testing, and I think we are almost done. So the next part is all about your static assets, and we will start with this part right in the next video.